Good morning and welcome. I'm Nelson Kunkel, the Chief Marketing Officer for Deloitte's sustainability business. And it's my distinct pleasure to kick off this week of conversations between Deloitte, the United Nations Development Program, and the Public Foundation, live, of course, from the Cannes Lion International Festival of Creativity. For the next several days, we'll be hosting a series of discussions and features around taking on the world's largest challenges for people and planet at the intersection of technology, ingenuity, and of course, creativity. So we look forward to hearing from executives, leaders, and marketers alike as we examine what it means to have a more prosperous and sustainable future. So to get started, a final welcome to everyone joining us, to everyone here that's made time available to be part of this. And I'm fortunate to be hosting this with my collaborator, Boaz Paldi, the Chief Creative Officer of the UNDP. Boaz?
Thanks very much, Nelson. It's a pleasure to be here. We're very, very excited to have this opportunity to have these conversations in Cannes. A special thank you to our broadcast partner, We Don't Have Time, that you are probably watching this live broadcast on now, and we're very grateful for that broadcast. The Cannes Lions Festival of Creativity is probably the largest and most significant annual gathering of the creative and marketing community of the world. It's a place where creativity comes together to really solve big problems. And the big problems that we want to solve are the largest issues that we face, as Nelson mentioned. We've got the looming climate emergency. We have crisis in nature. We have the poverty issues around the world. And all of these things need everyone to get involved. We need everyone's support in order to solve these very, very big problems that we have. The United Nations can't do it alone. Civil society can't do it alone. NGOs can't do it alone. Governments can't do it alone. And private sector can't do it alone. But all together, we can solve these problems, and through creativity, that's probably the best way of kickstarting those conversations. So we're very excited to have those conversations here in Cannes this week. It is my pleasure to introduce the first panel that we have, Barbara Venneman, the Global Advertising and Marketing and Commerce Leader and Principal at Deloitte Digital. Please welcome Barbara.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to introduce our first panel of today here at the United Nations SDG Lounge. My name is Barbara Venneman, and I am the global leader for Deloitte Digital. We are excited about partnering with the United Nations Development Program as well as partnering with the Public Foundation. So let's dive right into it. I would like to invite my panelists to introduce themselves. Ulrika.
So great to be here. My name is Ulrika Moder, and I'm Assistant Secretary General with UNDP, United Nations Development Program.
Thank you. We're excited to have you here.
Thank you for having us. Sergio Fernandez de Cordova. I'm the Chairman of the Public Foundation.
Thank you. Excited to have you here.
And thanks, Barbara. Great to see you again. Nelson Kunkel, the CMO for Deloitte's sustainability business.
Excellent. Okay, so let's dive right into it. Let me kick it off with an opening question to you all to start the conversation around getting real on sustainable innovations. I'd like to start with Ulrika, followed by Sergio and Nelson. And the question is, how can public and private collaborate more effectively to scale up sustainable solutions and ensure that we replicate those solutions across different regions and across different industries?
Let me just start to remind us that back in 2015, we took a decision that is the world leaders, governments across the world decided on the Sustainable Development Goals. We are reaching half-time. We are almost there, but nowhere near because we're actually moving in reverse. Now, the reminder is also about the fact that it was never meant only to be governments or states that were responsible. We need to, of course, to lay the ground with regards to guidance, but also with regards to enabling of investments and the private sector to do their part.
Yes.
And what we see right now is actually the private sector engaging increasingly, while not always having that groundwork laid out for them.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do with the United Nations Development Programme is to see how we can, for instance, through SDG impact process standards, guide both private equity, private firms and corporates to see how they can have sustainable development goals aligned standards that could guide core business and core investments.
And that is a critical success factor, isn't it? To have common goals that everyone is aligned to and agreed to across public sector as well as private sector.
Yeah, because the important thing about the Sustainable Development Goals is that it's not only about environmental climate change, it's really how it should be both economically sustainable, socially sustainable, and then respect the boundaries of our planet. So it's a very comprehensive agenda with regards to sustainability, and it goes beyond the ESG standards that we are operating with now and has a much more comprehensive approach.
Yes, love that. Sergio, what are your thoughts?
Well, a lot of, one of the main reasons here for the SDG Lounge, which we launched here last year, is really to bring in the multi-stakeholder approach, right? So basically, it's not just public and private, but also NGOs and civil society. So when you look at the SDGs, when they were launched, the SDG number 17, it talks about public and private partnerships, talks about partnerships overall. As Ulrika said, it's not just the governments are setting out the framework, right? So there's 17 goals, 169 targets, and then regional indicators. And regional indicators are because you need to adapt to regional, cultures, as you know, the work that you guys do. Everything is regional, right? So you have to actually understand the cultural impact and what that means, what sustainability means at the local level. And for that, you need the stakeholders, not just XYZ corporation, but actual local stakeholders, right? And that's why we also talk about the multi-stakeholder approach. And even when you're looking at here with the lounge, a lot of it is not just where is private sector or where is public sector or where is civil society, but really where are the examples, as you said earlier, that we could celebrate and replicate, right? So the SDG Lounge is a sister product of the SDG Media Zone, which happens during the UN General Assembly. Right, and this was launched during, the launch of the SDGs, and really to continue to celebrate and to showcase this. Because if we're not telling everyone, we're not here celebrating, bringing in all the creatives, the marketers, the people that have invented the brands that, that are consume our life every day, right? And how do we use that intelligence from private sector to actually continue to engage folks to say, hey, you know what, this is what I could do to, drive towards the goals forward. Or
everyone has a role to play, don't they?
Exactly. And everyone could do one thing.
And everyone, exactly. Have you seen some really good examples of partnership between the public and private sector?
Yes, I mean, there are so many. A perfect example is as an organization like Esri or someone, who's using their technology to advance data. Right, how governments and private sector and civil society, right? Because we have to remember that we're all entrepreneurial in our own ways of how we could solve a problem. Right. Right. Yeah. That's one of the greatest things about humanity. We're innovators, right? And so, how do you actually bring in data and information, right? Others, obviously, folks like yourselves who have given us the space to actually tell our story, to continue to create. Or, perfect example again is when we look at Frankie the Dinosaur and Don't Choose Extinction, right? This was an initiative that came out from the UNDP office, and then basically they said, okay, we need stakeholders to help us bring in the dollars to cover the costs. We need stakeholders that have resources. We need stakeholders that have ways to amplify this. So that's part of the work that we do at Public is we bring in all 10, 20 different ingredients to then figure out how to actually tell that story. But, there's so many of these examples, and one of the things that Rico said this year at the UN, celebrating the midterm. So it's really a time where it's a sanity check for the world, right? A lot of people actually don't even understand that this is happening, right? And that's also a reality check that people should say, hey, look, we've been at this for 7 years. Yeah. There are people that are just realizing it through ESG and saying, oh my God, ESG just happened, launched 2 years ago. Yeah. It's like, no, this has been going on. And then how do we help inspire others,
But
right,
it's
to take action.
And it's now top of mind for everyone. And so we need to take advantage and leverage this opportunity to try to get more collaboration and accelerate the change for the good
And
of
there's
everyone.
a theme here coming through that you brought up in your initial question, which is scale. And what I
Yes.
love about this conversation is we need to move beyond what we're all doing as individuals, because that's
Yes.
known. We have a clear understanding of how we contribute. But this ability to scale across giant systems of public, private, capital markets, et cetera, that are all invested in something that's going to solve real problems globally and solve them in a way that's much more accelerated, that is much faster, that has much bigger impact
Right.
on the world and people and planet. That's where I think this is getting to.
And have you seen good examples of scaling solutions from one region to another or one industry to another? Because many of those creative, innovative ideas can be applied across many sectors or regions.
So if I could mention, I mean, because the UN, United Nations, is a great platform, because
Yes.
UNDP, for instance, we have presence in 170 countries. So within the field of renewable energy, for instance, we have definitely been able to make the case, of course, together with governments looking where there are investment opportunities, where we don't have to use the scarce resources we have for this official development assistance, or aid as we call it, but where we can actually drive investments. And of course, the transitioning of energy system is not only green transitioning, it's also really the possibility to combat poverty, but also if you do it in the right way. And we have beautiful examples in a country like Yemen, so conflict-ridden, where we have female entrepreneurs that had that injection of capital, but are now actually driving their own renewable energy off-grid company in a conflict in a country like Yemen. I mean, the female leadership is there. It's just fantastic and amazing to see and inspiring.
That is fantastic and a very inspiring story.
And one other example of actually, if I may just add, I think that we're seeing, which is a phenomenal sort of shift. You know, as Rika said, we need investments, right? And what we've been seeing is a sort of shift of the family offices really stepping up and saying, hey, it's not just about what one of my companies can do, but what purpose and legacy mean to a family, and how can they involved in these projects in Yemen or elsewhere around the world. And I think that's also, when you say of examples, like an industry sort of focused example,
Yes.
where now we're seeing that shift of quote unquote trillions or whatever that is, right? But based on how people can do their part just with their own, what they define as their purpose and legacy.
That's so true. Everyone needs to own the opportunity and the problem. From your perspective, Sergio, what role can organizations like the United Nations Development Program and Public Foundation play in facilitating collaboration between public sectors and the private sector?
Well, I think the most important part is convening, showcasing actual real-life examples, right? Bringing stakeholders, not to do it all, but for everyone to play a role, right? And I think, you know, from a private sector mentality, it's let me just manage the entire thing, right? And when you look at, you know, true evolution is you need the different stakeholders to actually play a role. And I think that the best thing that we could do and we continue to do, hence, you know, again, here with the SDG Lounge, and we not just attend cons, we go to the World Investment Forum, to WIF, to, you know, to WEF, to, you know, COP, where we're going to be there showcasing, we're bringing different stakeholders in, family offices, heads of government, heads of multinationals, right? Heads of multinationals, and not just your usual Fortune 500, but actually folks that are that next generation leaders who, by the way, their DNA is completely different because they've built their businesses around sustainability.
Yes.
Versus a 100-year-old legacy business that's going to have a really hard time shifting, right? There's not 100 Paul Palmas out there that could actually move the meter the way he did in his organization. So some of it is actually stemming from, you know, areas like, you know, from the Middle East, from Africa, from Latin America, from Brazil. And you're seeing these companies that are actually building thriving businesses that are actually changing the planet. So that's part of it, is showcasing these so people don't people realize that it is happening, that people are doing it, and they're building it from the DNA up.
It is encouraging to see some progress, although not enough progress, and we need to continue to push forward. Nelson, I'd like to turn to you, and maybe let's talk a little about the private sector. What do you see happening in the private sector? Do you think that we are doing enough around sustainability?
Well, that's a tricky question. Are we doing enough? I think we're seeing the private sector move into this in a very incentivized way. This is not about tearing down the structures upon which we stand. It's about growing into new structures and inventing new structures, which means creating more growth and new opportunity, which is wonderful for the private sector. What I see happening is very similar to what Sergio was talking about, is the intersection of private really leaning on public in a much different way than I think we've ever seen historically in different eras of industry. There's work that we're doing at the convening of hydrogen, for example, where we're taking fossil fuel centers and literally transforming them into hydrogen centers. And it's huge private investment and capital market investment to make this happen, but it also needs cooperation and ingenuity and creativity of the public sector to do things in a way faster than they've ever done before and different than they've ever done before. And to your opening point, which is, and do it in a way that involves the community, that restructures how people think about their jobs, how they train for new careers, how we think about all sorts of opportunity. And that for the private sector just means growth and wonderful ways of contributing and helping while not losing the bottom line.
Eureka, would you agree that the private sector is leaning in appropriately?
I'm not sure appropriately is the right word, because when we look at the midpoint, we know that we are not on track. On the contrary, we're actually moving in reverse in 30% of the goals that we have set. We are stalled more or less in relation to 50, and very few are actually progressing the way they should. So we need exponential change. Especially because some of these tendencies are really concerning. I mean, we are really trespassing the boundaries of our planet and doing so in a way that will make us move towards tipping points that makes some changes irreversible. I think also with regards to the social fabric of our societies, we see so much conflict, so much disinformation, misinformation, authoritarian rule taking over and so on. So there's so much to be done, but we definitely see an increasing interest. And I think this joint language of the Sustainable Development Goals, it takes some time, but we hear more and more actors in the space, on the private sector side, the public side, speak this joint language. And once you have understood that this is actually the way to invest towards the future, and taking responsibility will actually also give you possibilities, I think we see that people are not turning back. It becomes a commitment that you have with yourself, with your company, and where you act also as a politician.
Right. I feel like everyone does understand the importance and the urgency of addressing this. And events like Cannes Lions is fantastic to see ESG being such a broad and important topic, top of mind for everyone. So that is encouraging, but we definitely have a lot more work to do. Sergio, I'd love to ask you a question in around how could the public sector better leverage the expertise and the resources of the private sector to try to accelerate innovation and sustainable solutions in the market?
That's an excellent question, Barbara. Thank you. And as Nelson had mentioned before, it's really kind of, taking that intellectual property, like sort of the network capital, the human capital, right? And you actually are bringing that, and we do this a lot with small islands, and basically bringing that intelligence, copying that and providing that to the public sector, right? Without a commercial intent. It's a fast way to do it, but a short way to do it. Right, meaning that, fast as in like as fast as you're going to move public sector, because you have to teach and educate on that, hey, this is actually going to advance. It's going to have these hydrogen solutions. It's creating less infrastructure build out. You're actually refabbing. You're grabbing old and making it new again, and you're bringing in what is the fastest way to scale any conversation, which is capitalism, right? So that is supersedes anything else. But government, if there's too much of an agenda, right, then they are saying, okay, no, I don't want to advance your interests, because then you have to go to RFP, you have to go through due process. But if you're bringing the intelligence and you're planting it in so they could build from within, giving them the tools to scale internally, because then they could put it into their policies and procedures, and then engage not just one stakeholder, but all the best 10.
Yes.
Right? And that's how you really, but the problem is that the private sector sometimes just says, no, I don't care, I just want it, or I'll leave. Right? And that sort of mindset is starting to shift, because, hey, what if you had 1/10 of the opportunity versus 100%, but you actually got it.
Yeah.
And 100% is a maybe never, because that's why everyone hates public-private partnerships and everyone runs away from any procurement, because there's 1,000 organizations. But if you have that multi-stakeholder approach, the power to convene around a solution, everybody adds their ingredients, and you're able to actually scale, like the conversation, you know, the example you used. And I think that thinking, that's a lot of, we're always trying to bring everybody together to have these conversations, because that actually works.
Yes.
Right, and believe it or not, right, Enrico will tell you, government leaders at the national and subnational level actually want that intelligence. They come to the UN during the General Assembly, to all these events, and say, who is out there innovating, and can they please come to my country?
Yes.
Right, and private sector's knocking on a door 1,000 ways over, and then saying, well, how do we monetize that? No, take the time, right, and actually have that conversation. You know, then we could actually solve these problems and create an opportunity that's 100x, right? Not just 10x.
Yes.
And I think that, as Enrico said, the shift is happening because the conversations are happening.
Yes.
And when conversations do happen, then we could scale, you know, climate-based solutions, or inclusive solutions, educational solutions. You know, not just climate, as Ulrika said, but really there's 17 goals and 169 targets. So,
and it's important to prioritize and understand what each party can bring to the collaboration to accelerate that change, and leverage and complement what each party brings. Ulrika, what are your thoughts around
but there's so
leveraging the expertise?
Yeah, I mean, there is so much potential, and I definitely think that's what the UN has as well that is really important is data and statistics. But there is so much happening in this space that can inform the discussions even better. But then at the end of the day, there's this groundwork with regards to an enabling environment. I mean, rule of law, good governance, legislation that actually lays the ground not short-term but long-term. And here is, of course, a concern that we see a lot of short-termism also in politics. But at the same time, I mean, we had the EU last week deciding on the Fit for 55 in relation to the climate responsibility. I mean, the US has taken action. There's things happening in China and India and so on. So, of course, we need the big players as well to come forward, not in a competitive way that is unhealthy, but actually lies the ground for healthy competition. So that's what we hope for. But, of course, it's a quite troubled world with regards to dialogue in between different actors as well. So.
It is difficult, but we must not give up and continue to try. Nelson, quick question to all of you as we wrap up. What is your call to action to create more innovative solutions, to get more collaboration across the private public sector, and to meet the urgency of
It's a great question. For me, it's been on my mind because we're here. And why are we here at this festival? Because this can't just be resolved by policymakers and scientists and technologists, engineers, et cetera. We have to invite in the creative community, people who understand language, who understand how to protect and nurture an idea, a vision for something different. And it's that combination, it's not just that, but it's that combination into this legacy problem and challenge that we've all faced that's gonna accelerate that change through creativity and through innovation and just through a different thinking.
Excellent, thank you. Sergio, call to action.
Call to action is basically create partnerships, come up with a solution, right? Find what is that one thing to fire, and find your partners. And as Nelson said, I mean, we're here at the Festival of Creativity.
Yes.
Right. We have some of the best marketers, right, and there's some of the best brains in the world. It's bringing these people together, find a partnership. It's not about me, it's about we, and how do we actually bring all these different stakeholders together and actually do something.
Yes.
Right. Because as we said earlier, we all can do one thing, right, and that one thing leads to 100 other things, but it's take that first step.
Yes.
But the thing that defines, with your purpose and your passion.
All partnerships and actions, small or big, are very important towards this goal, aren't they? Ulrika?
The creative industry is incredibly important, kind of cut through the noise. So that's, of course, my call to action to help us in the UN, as we are doing also in partnership with you, for instance,
Yes.
to make sure that we can bring messages to people that also brings hope that people actually believe that change is possible. The actions that they take as citizens, whether it's in their daily lives or with regards to how they invest, if they have money to invest, or how they take political decisions, if they are voting, for instance, matters. So I think the creative industry, we really need them so badly to kind of cut through the noise that is out there. And also, to be honest, the misinformation and disinformation that is taking over. So using the data and all the knowledge that we have also from the scientific community to have real conversations about solutions. I think that's my call to action.
I love it. Thank you very much, panelists. Lots to reflect on. Really appreciate your time and your dedication and devotion to creating a better world for everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I think we're back. Here we go. All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay. Once again, Nelson Kunkel, Chief Marketing Officer for Deloitte Sustainability Business. And I am moderating a conversation about the power of embedding equity. Joined here today by Disney's President of Advertising, Rita Farrell, and WNBA's SVP and Chief Growth Officer, Kali Edison. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here. Let's start with Rita. I'd love to hear just a little bit about specifically your role at the intersection of content and embedding equity and sustainability. How do you think about your role? Tell us a little bit more about how that applies to Disney.
Yeah. So, well, across Disney today, we are one sales organization that sits across an intersection of linear networks, streaming platforms, and all of our digital businesses, as well as our stations. So that includes ESPN, obviously, and the topic on women in sports is a really important one in terms of the equity conversation, but it's really around all inclusion efforts. And so we've been on a journey for many, many years now, but started, as we brought our 8 teams together into one, because they were all separate organizations, making sure that that was a very big pillar in everything that we talked about in terms of not only content creation, but the requirements of how we worked with partners and making sure that, at every upfront we have a message. We expect a piece of, the upfront commitments to be around programming and content that really drives representation. And that representation is inclusive of, obviously, people of underserved communities of all sizes and colors. And when I say that, I mean everything from, we talk about, African American, Latino, and all of that, but also around women in sports was a big pillar for us. And it was because, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, 26
27.
27 years ago, we decided to partner and really make sure that we were representing women in sports who are, by the way, over 50% of the viewers that we serve every day. And from a brand marketing perspective, a lot of the people who make the buying decisions of the products that are marketed across our platforms. And so we really made a commitment in that space. And what we've seen over time is brands really getting involved and coming to the table, requiring that also as well from the platforms that they work with. And so it was an easy conversation, not an easy feat to really get executed. But we've seen tremendous growth and improvement in that, especially, I would say, in the last 5 years, where brands understand that it's no longer important to do it because it's the right thing to do, but it's important to do it because it's good business practice.
That's right.
Great business practice. It drives ROI. And it also drives, in a world where the brands that you spend as a consumer matter what their values are, they have to align to mine. I want to spend with brands who are aligned with my values. And so I think brands are really coming to understand that wholeheartedly and really driving that investment forward. And it's exciting to see, but we still have a lot of work to do.
Great. And I want to talk more about several things that you mentioned, Kali.
Coley.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
Tell me a little bit more about your role, and sort of same question to you. How are you thinking about WNBA when it comes to sort of content perception and even storytelling, if I can?
Yeah, so I am the Chief Growth Officer at the WNBA, really responsible for our revenue growth and generation. And so that could look like anything from partnerships to media rights and our digital products. And everything we do is based in our goal for inclusion and equity. If you look at our league, we represent over 80% of women of color make up our league, right? So it's 144 women with 288 amazing stories. And we're looking for partners to help us tell that story. On the court, the play has never been better. We're seeing, just the other day, 109 versus 103. These scores didn't exist. If you look at, the Final Four, and commanding 12.5 million viewers at peak. And then just at our season last year, we did the best in viewership that we've done in 17 years. But this doesn't happen overnight. Everything that we do is intentional, it's thoughtful, and it's grounded in our goal for equity and inclusion in every step of the way.
Yeah. And there's this theme of navigating the cultural moments, connecting authentically with your audience. Pick who starts first, but whichever wants to jump in. And what have been some of the challenges with doing that, or some of the maybe the things holding organizations back from doing that? And then how are you taking some of those challenges on? What have you seen as successes in doing that?
Yeah, so I think, we started a new program called Changemakers. And so this is our group of our top sponsors. And what we've really developed is a two-way partnership. We know that we need funding to accomplish certain things, and that funding goes toward marketing and human capital. In order to do that, we also raised a $75 million investment from external partners for the first time ever in sports. But it works two ways. It's a two-way partnership. How can we help brands achieve their DE&I objectives? How can we make sure they're being more thoughtful and inclusive? And what that looks like is providing opportunities, whether it's U.S. Bank coming in to teach about financial literacy to our players, a great partner in Deloitte who helped us build our app and our .com, so there's more accessibility and visibility. AT&T and their She's Connected platform, which gives all of the players a phone and service, and Nike and Google coming in to make sure that all of our playoffs are on ESPN. So this partnership only works if each of our valued partners are in it for a collective reason. And so we look at these partners and brands as serving a greater cause. And so we try to focus on this shared areas of impact. For us, it's how do we keep girls in sport, and how do we develop diverse leaders both on and off the court.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I would say, to piggyback on that, I agree. And what you're hearing in that message is intentionality, right?
Yeah.
Across the board, intentionality from the platforms, from the leagues, and from the sponsors who are coming in to make sure it represents the audiences that it's being served. When you look across our platform today, the other piece that complements everything that she just referenced is really around measurement and making sure we can quantify the return on ad spend that is happening across the board in all these platforms, so that they come back, and they come back bigger and bolder and more inclusive of other sports. We've seen a tremendous growth the last year. We've seen 27% growth across all of women's sports, marketing dollars being spent across our platform. We had the highest NCAA women's final ever on the platform since its launch. 53% growth of ad revenue in that space. So the brands are showing up, and they're showing up because it's working. But we have to continually innovate on how we measure, on connecting the dots across the platforms. How do we tell that story, not only of the live game, but get them invested in the talent, get them invested in the players and their stories across screens, social, extensions, all of those things, so that people want to come back. Because it's all about the consumer coming back and spending more time that ultimately transcends that.
I love it. Talk a little bit about that tension then between the consumers, the fans, between sponsors, the outside world, and then what you both are trying to drive from your organizations. Do you see it as a push out to say, we're centered, this is what we're going to do, what we have to do, what we should do? Is it being demanded of you? Like, where is that balance?
You want me to start, or you want to?
Sure.
Okay. So I actually think a couple of years ago, it was a push out. And I actually think now there's a very nice tension of, there are brands, you mentioned it, a lot of them, AT&T, Google, Target, Ally Bank, who have come in and said, you have a CMO in Ally Bank who said, I'm going to move 50% of my dollars into female sports, made a broad decision to do that, and has been super intentional about where they spend their money. You need brands like that to show up and lead the way, and CMOs who have the passion and, frankly, the bravery to stand up and do that. But ultimately, it's delivered for them, right? It's delivered for them in ways that have transcended what I think even they anticipated at the beginning, because we've been in it with them. We're figuring out how do you really market that? How do you really take the time to create the measurement around it, the models where they can actually validate the value that is coming back to them by spending. And by the way, ultimately, yes, there's a piece of it's important to do good and it's important to be there, because girls, we know that when girls participate in sports, they do better across the board, right? They come into the C-suite, and the drop-off is huge, right? By the time they're 14, girls drop off at a rate of 3-to-1 to boys in sports. And those girls that play sports through college tend to have more success in the business world. They understand team sports. They understand how to work in big organizations. That's really important as we start to drive the future of the opportunities in business.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Totally, yeah.
if you look at this, it's anecdotal, but it's kind of there. 1% of all sports sponsorship dollars go to women, and only 5% of sports media coverage goes to women. So we have to change that narrative, and it's not going to happen overnight. ESPN has been our amazing partner since our inaugural season. And it's not just about the live games. How do we build shoulder content around our live games? So we have WNBA Countdown. We've been having WNBA Draft Day. It's investing in the storytelling, because this next generation of talent that we're seeing, right? So everyone can probably name Sue Bird or Cheryl Swoops or Lisa Leslie, but this next generation of talent who's dealing with nil deals, and how do they take those brands that have marketed them in their college days, transfer that over to the pros? This is a new and exciting time, and we're seeing the next generation of talent on the court, and people like, an Asia Wilson, a Brianna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, Aaliyah Boston, who's playing in her first year out of school. So how do we support these women by giving them a platform that not only helps them grow on the court, but off the court as well?
Yeah. I love those stories. Talk a little bit about leadership then. What is the role of leaders? Is it about just staying committed and centered? Is it about bravery and courage? Or, is it simply about taking this moment to lean in on things that truly drive and show growth? Like, where are you both as leaders? And I'll start with you, Rita.
Yeah.
Like, how does this apply to you personally and then to other leaders in your organization and sort of sharing and creating collective values?
For me, it's important personally in terms of, as a Latina executive in business, I understood how hard it is to get to where we are. And I understood the importance of having mentors and sponsors being there for you and kind of helping you and bring you along the journey and representing you when you're not in the room, which is the other piece. I also know how important it is, because when I look around Jimmy's table, Jimmy is the head of ESPN, 50% of that table is women, right? He's made it intentional from the very top to make sure that the people making the decisions, his CMO, his head of sales, his head of HR, right? Those are women. Heads of production are people who represent the audiences we want to serve. That didn't look like that 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's really important in terms of how we think about the storytelling that's happening in the business. And it's really intentional for my teams too, right? When we talk about this, it matters to them. We wouldn't have the success we have if they weren't committed and believed in this. And by the way, I think there's, when you look back and you think of, the women in the room, yes, they believe in it, but, I have a lot of girl dads on my team who are super committed and every day walk in and show me videos on their phone of their daughters playing whatever they play. It's exciting to see, right? And that passion, that energy, I think that transcends everything of all the challenges and all the opportunity that exists in front of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just to that point, it's about making, like we said before, intentional decisions. We just received our TIDE score, which is the Institute for Diversity and Ethics in Sports. We get an A+ across the board, and that doesn't happen just because. We have more women who are represented as presidents across our teams. We have more women and people of color who are in assistant and main coaching positions. And so I think that intentionality comes through with, I know my leadership is Kathy Engelbert, who is formerly the first ever female CEO of Deloitte.
That's right.
And when I joined the league, I was 6 months pregnant. And the first thing she said to me was, what size onesie are we going to get you? Right? And that is because we see women and the power of women holistically. So we know if you want to be a successful player on the court, what about when you get pregnant? We got to make sure that you have maternity coverage, and we're going to not let you lose your position on the team. And so she went and she really developed a very progressive CBA. And so our union, I think, is starting to see that leadership supports them as women. And I think that's something that's translated to our whole team, I know. And I see that in the greater NBA as well.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of the evolution of language, and you both have tipped into a little bit of the evolution of sort of culture and society, especially as it comes to equity and women's sports. I'm personally interested and happy that the evolution of the word sustainability is now inclusive of not just climate technology, sort of environmental issues, but it's now inclusive of equity and social change. Talk a little bit about the role here of creativity in your businesses. What's the role in the WNBA of the creative mindset, creative thinking, language,
Yeah.
the deliberate use of sort of marketing and the power of creativity.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the collective of partners who are in it with us, and then creating meaningful creative that supports our overall mission. So just this week, we launched our Pride is Love content series on our new WNBA app. And it's important to tell these stories because there's not that many platforms that are willing to tell the story of Black LGBTQ plus love stories. But there should be because they exist. And so if we can provide equity and sustainability in our platforms, in our content, what are we saying then to the larger world? That it's time, we're here. And so I think, it's funny, I have a lot of production companies who want to tell docuseries, and then right as we're about to find distribution, we're facing challenges. And that's the narrative I'd like to see change. I'd like to see these stories told not just on our owned and operated platforms, and ESPN and Disney are great partners in making sure we're telling those stories, and including some of our top talent, NECA, on the NBA Today show. But we need to, there's a lot of room for improvement. Yeah. And I think the way we see it is we're going to use our O&Os to say what we want and how we want to say it. We're going to serve our players. We are a player-led organization. And so I think you're seeing the progress, at least on our owned and operated, and it's very much, it's part of our creative process. The people who you're going to see covering us on the court, they look and they talk and they feel like the players themselves. And that's important to see it reflected back.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's, might seem intuitive as a company, Disney representing like storytelling worldwide for generations and generations of people, but talk a little bit about maybe the non-obvious role of creativity as it applies to this conversation.
I mean, we really took a look across our organization in terms of how we invest in talent, how we make sure that we have talent in the pipeline who represents the audiences we serve. It's a really important piece of the talent and creative process. But as part of that, there's a whole role in creativity in terms of how we think about our partnerships tying into that opportunity. And so we actually have a whole organization within my sales organization that really is the intersection of creative storytelling and brand storytelling, who represents the diversity of opportunity and audiences that we serve. And makes it easier, because one of the things that's hard is, like, I think there's a lot of brands who want to do great things with us, but can't figure out the entry point. How do we do it? Like yesterday, for example, we launched Level Up. And Level Up is a program around how are we going to make it easier to work with women's sports. Yeah. It's a whole initiative around if you want to spend money in women's sports. By the way, it doesn't have to be basketball. Great that it is. Basketball is probably having its moment more than any other moment in women's sports. But there is a ton of opportunity when we think across the board in college sports. Those are the athletes of the future. Invest in them now. Build a relationship with those athletes. Those could be the next, any star across any platform. And then they're going to be in at the entry level, right? And so it's really, really important that we make it easier to work with us in this space, and almost a enabler of that in terms of everything from how to spend, from creating the opportunity of how they show up in the content, because it's probably not the same commercial that they would typically use, but it is more focused in terms of those audiences, and then the measurement and ROI, because at the end of the day, if they can't quantify the value, they'll do it once because it was nice to do, then we won't come back and do it because it's good to do.
So there's a bunch of cues in there. I've been, no pressure, Coley,
yes.
but I've been told I have time for one more question.
Okay.
So for those who are listening who are not involved in sports, public sector, startups, NGOs, other things, like what's a takeaway? What lessons could we all learn outside of what you both are doing in this regard?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about that question and how it does relate to the WNBA, I think a big part of it is if you don't see it, if you don't see yourself there, create it. And that is something, I came from a world of men's sports and did not see the opportunities, and I created those opportunities. And once you create them, look back and make more room on the table for the next generation to come.
Awesome. Awesome. Well said. Thank you both for joining us. I'm encouraged and excited and inspired by what you both are doing. So that's it. We're going to wrap this session, and we'll have more conversations soon about this topic.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back. back. I'm Boaz Paldi, Chief Creative Officer of the United Nations Development Program. This panel is brought to you exclusively by the United Nations Development Program and Public Foundation. We're going to be talking about oceans and ocean rights. We're joined by Ulrika Modir, United Nations Development Program Assistant Secretary General, and Johan Strid, am I saying that right? Director of Ocean Policy in the Ocean Race. And we're going to be talking about the Ocean Race today. It's, and about ocean rights. We have, obviously, we all know that the oceans are we need to take action on the ocean. There's problems in the ocean, and that's what we're really going to dive into today. I'll start with you, Ulrika, if you don't mind. Give us a little bit of an overview of some of the issues that we're facing with our oceans today. What's some of the problems that are out there?
So the oceans, they have their own particular goal of the Sustainable Development Goals, Goal 14. But at the end of the day, it is, of course, about the health of the oceans, the fact that the oceans have taken so much responsibility to make sure that our systems could actually work. Half of the oxygen that we breathe come from the oceans. I mean, it's really so important for everything that is about life on Earth. But it's also, of course, the lifeline for so many communities, countries across the world with regards to income. So when we look at the oceans and Goal 14, it's really about both sustainable economic development, it's about environment, biodiversity in the oceans, it's about the plastic problem that we have, it's about climate change affecting the oceans. So there are so many wide ranges of issues, but it's also about actually how we can build a socioeconomic, healthy way to relate to the oceans also, even with regards to gender equality.
Thank you, Ulrika. It's also one of our biggest carbon sinks that we have.
Definitely.
That can help us kind of mitigate the climate emergency.
Yeah.
Johan, can you tell us a little bit about the ocean race, the background, what you're trying to achieve?
Sure. The ocean race is the toughest test of a team in sport. We are a round-the-world sailing competition where teams are competing and sailing around the complete planet. We are sailing in areas where very few other people sail, like around the Antarctica. We had the longest leg of this race, 50 years history, starting in Cape Town, South Africa, and then up to Itajaí in Brazil. 35 days of sailing in very difficult conditions, but also we are a platform for ocean health and ocean rights. We drive for ocean protection. In all our boats, there is a laboratory that takes scientific testing, and we have this race. We have gathered 4.2 million data points in our science program. We also do learning. We also do political drive for the recognition of the inherent rights of the ocean.
And can you speak a tiny bit about the inherent rights of the ocean?
Sure. I mean, sailors have a very personal relationship to the ocean. You know, that sailors, they relate to it, they attribute it personality, like the ocean is angry, the ocean is calm, the ocean gives and the ocean takes. The first rule of sailing is that any competitor or vessel should help any other competitor or vessel in danger. And if you have that personal relationship to the ocean and look at the status of the ocean, it's quite obvious that we as sailors need to take action to save the ocean.
We have a small video to show from the race. I wonder if we can roll video now.
Sure.
There cannot be a healthy planet without a healthy ocean, and the ocean's health is currently in decline. Now, all of you would be aware that global warming has big effects on the ocean, from the death of coral to rising sea levels and changing ocean currents. So these are not normal times, and I open with these remarks just to put the importance of the ocean race into context. So by going to the edges, we discover the state of things, and the ocean race has always gone to the edges. 2022 and 2023 are, I believe, turning points in our battle to stop the decline of the ocean's health. For the ocean that we want, we need the good science, and I thank you, all of you, who are taking part in that exercise.
You have to preserve this planet for future generations.
We have the opportunity to drive change.
The oceans have rights in the same ways that humans have rights.
These ocean summits that bring together the worlds of sport, industry, government, science and ocean advocates.
We clearly support the Ocean Race and their partners in their work towards the Universal Declaration of Ocean Rights.
I'm seeing three important roles for a Universal Declaration of Ocean Rights. First would be protection, the second would be principles, and the third would be processes. And these need to be applicable throughout our shared ocean, for as we've heard and as we've seen viscerally with the plastic.
Incredible video. I mean, it just looks so exciting. I want to be on those boats, though I'm not a sailor.
We can see through that.
but it looks so difficult as well to do this ocean race. How do they train to get to this point?
I mean, these are elite athletes. They are they are the best of the best in the sport of sailing. In the sport of sailing, the ocean race is judged to be the top sort of challenge. It's, to some of them, is even more important than the Olympic Games. There are a lot of time going into this. It's also a lot of focus on getting the boat right and having all that. You know, the powers that they are exposed to sailing around the world is amazing. So it's not only that we do science when we're sailing, it's a lot of science behind these boats. And you saw these with the foils. These are boats that actually fly, and they can sail faster than the wind blows.
Incredible. And the fact that you're using athletes as scientists, I think, is unique to this race. I don't think that happens anywhere else.
Well, there are some elements of it in sports, but we are the one that taken it furthest, I would say. And we say now that we are the sport event anyway that have gathered the largest number of data points compared to any other sport. So yeah, we are proud of that. And we're also proud of that we're using the full platform in all its shapes and form to drive for the recognition of ocean rights and the recognition that there can't be a healthy planet without a healthy ocean, as we heard the UN envoy.
Absolutely. I know that we're trying to connect to one of the boats now in the sea. I'm hearing that we have some technical issues, but I'll try and connect when we can. But Ulrika, in the meantime, can you tell us a little bit about the progress of SDG 14, the ocean SDG? It's lacking in progress.
Yeah.
What action can be taken to accelerate the progress, and why are initiatives in the ocean race so important to this?
It's lacking in progress also because it lacks investments, which is really concerning and also quite surprising, because many of the solutions that we are looking for will actually bring about, as I said, a healthy economy as well. So UNDP, speaking about having platforms, we have this amazing platform of 170 countries among our member states, and we have made an ocean promise as United Nations Development Programme to actually use this worldwide platform to see how we can accelerate action in relation to the ocean and then connect the dots, because we're looking for these system solutions. So we can also encourage politicians, government, and beyond, of course, at the local level, but also the private sector in countries to come together and see that there are opportunities. There are investment opportunities when you safeguard the ocean, with regards, of course, to the obvious. You could think about tourism, but of course also the fishery industry and so on. So with responsibility, we believe also opportunity will come, and that's what we want to show, also using data and statistics, but using then our platform so that these 100 countries also can learn from each other and see how system solutions can actually really scale also action on sustainable ocean.
I'm going to check if we can go to the teams on a boat. I'm wondering, do we have sound on the boat? Can we go to the boats?
There. Yeah.
Hey, we are very lucky to Sorry.
You're not connected to the boat, unfortunately. Hi, I'm Cornelius. I work for Team Malizia, and I was trying to connect you to the boat, but there is some satellite issues we have at the moment. I'm still hanging on in the channel to get a connection, but unfortunately, it seems like that I have to take your questions.
That's perfect. We're very excited to have you here. So my questions are, from the team that you work with, what are the types of things that they see in the ocean that are part of the problem that we're facing with these ocean rights, with the problems with the ocean? Can you give us a little bit of a flavor of what these teams have seen out there?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that, well, as you mentioned it, the biggest problem is actually like climate change, which is more or less like invisible, because it's like, you know, the transition or the challenge of actually that you see in the ocean with the impact on biodiversity, on the wildlife in long term. This like, it's an incremental change. But of course you see like a lot of plastic and, you know, gear and hazards in the ocean. So this is like obvious for the sailors. But as you mentioned it, the SDG 13, so climate action, and in relation to that, SDG 14, so life below water, this is the biggest challenge. This is like the planetary task, the planetary challenge that we're facing. And this is what also like our campaign, Race Must Win Climate Action Now, is all about.
That leads me to my next question. How is the Malizia team using the ocean race to advocate for the oceans?
Yeah, so the ocean race is an incredible platform, and also, you know, with the fact that we, for example, have onboard reporters connecting to land when the tech works. This gives it like a huge visibility. So the 50th anniversary of the ocean race is an incredible platform that is that we can use actually to raise the voice and speak up for the ocean, and you know, make people move with the emotions coming from sailing sports. This is an energy that we can use, and where we can really make a difference and create an impact and steer people into the right direction. Not only people, businesses, governments, policies, all that, the full package. And here I think in our team, for example, we're really good in really connecting with our partners. We have 7 main partners, and during the ocean race, for example, we have activated with them all around the world and bringing schools. We have an education program. It's called My Ocean Challenge. We brought a lot of kids to the boat. We went sailing. We teach them, and we inspire people around the world. And I think this is kind of a role model, this Ocean Race edition, for the years to come, to really like create a movement for the protection of our blue planet.
Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully next time we can also talk to your captains on the boat. But thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk to you a little bit later on. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Johan, what if the ocean had a voice at the table? What would it want from us?
I think it would, first of all, it would want us to contemplate, to realize the importance of the ocean to our life, and to recognize that the importance of ocean means that we need to recognize it has a rights in its own. So that's the first thing, because what we are doing now, we are making a lot of decisions without contemplating on the sort of larger effects on the ocean or the nature in general. I also think there would be decision-making systems would be much more intelligent if you had that voice at the table. Some function bringing that, okay, if we make this decision on fossil fuels, that will have this effect on me. Or if we make this decision on so offshore wind energy and so on, that will have this effect. And then I don't think it will lead to that it will say no, that the ocean will say no. I think it will lead to us being smarter in how we construct things.
And are you seeing a little bit of progress with your quest?
You know, it's so interesting. When we started to talk about ocean rights, and we had a conversation with a very sort of famous industrial leader, and his first reaction was, "Doesn't the ocean have rights?" And I think that is something that we meet quite often. And so when we talk about ocean rights and recognizing these rights, people feel that this is a logic step to do. We gained some political support from governments. We are working closely with the Cabo Verde government. We are working together with the Monaco government and a few others, a growing number. we have also a close cooperation with IUCN, but we are constantly looking for new partners because this is an ethical shift in our relationship with the ocean as humankind. And in order to achieve that, we need to be many more, and we need to have businesses, we need to have UNDP, which we have a good partnership growing with, we need to have more countries and so on.
And moving to you, Ulrika, can you elaborate a little bit about UNDP's work in the ocean, about the Ocean Promise, about other initiatives that we have?
Yeah, so I mean, UNDP, with our coverage, we have promised to support 100 member states in our Ocean Promise. And that is really leveraging the potential of the work that we also do in relation to climate change, because UNDP has supported the majority of member states with regards to the development of their national determined contributions. That is the promise that you make with regards to your action plan to mitigate climate change, but also work on adaptation. And then including also the work that we do on oceans, but broadening, as I said as well, also into looking at the opportunities with regards to a sustainable economic development. That would also take into consideration women's rights and how you can actually also make sure that what we do is inclusive and leading also towards what the Secretary General of the UN is speaking a lot about in our common agenda, that is a future discussion of what's going to happen or needs to happen worldwide, where he also discusses the intergenerational approaches to planning. So how can we take in consideration what is actually going to happen when we do certain investments now? Having said that, I think sometimes when we look at what's happening, we also need to look at what's actually happening here now, because a lot of co-benefit with regards to investments in healthy oceans or to mitigate climate change would actually mean a lot to our health and to so many issues that people are facing right here and now. So it's not only about the intergenerational approach, it's really, of course, what we see here and now with regards to access to possibilities for people, where we have really concerning situations across the world with regards to economies, the socioeconomic situation, related then also to the health of our oceans and our planet.
Thank you. Johan, we are in Cannes. We are here with the creative community. We're here with a lot of CMOs from big businesses. What's your call to action?
Very simple. Bring in the ocean where it should be in your business at the core. A healthy ocean is a healthy planet. Your business will not be healthy if you're not taking care of the planet and the ocean that you're acting upon. It's your core business. Speaking up for the rights of the ocean and speaking up for the rights of nature is something that should be at all the executive boards and management teams of companies. So, in a sense, it's easier for companies to do the right thing and do it soon than it is for governments, because you have to look at the final lines of your results, and one of them should be how you treat the ocean.
And all of our viewers out there that want to find out more, where can they get the resources to understand what they can do to help your cause?
Thank you very much. We have a public-facing campaign, onebluevoice.net, where you can go in and sign up for a Universal Declaration of Ocean Rights. If you want more in-depth on our policy work, you go to theoceanrace.com and click yourself onto the Racing for Purpose program.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Ulrika, from your perspective, SDG 14 is still the most underfunded SDG. What can we do to accelerate that funding? What can people do? What's possible? And what can it be done in this context again, in the Cannes Lions Festival of Creativity?
So I think throughout the past years, the understanding with regards to how concerning the situation of the health of the oceans has increased. But now it's time for action and investment. And here is where I would call for people also to look at what we're doing within the United Nations Development Program. You find it also when you Google our Ocean Promise or you go into undp.org. And what we need to do is, of course, to look for public, change. That is, that politicians need to take responsible decisions, hopefully then inspired by actions that also drive investments the right way. And here's where I think where UNDP can be of support, that we can actually guide political decisions that would then invite more investments into sustainable oceans work.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ulrika. Johan, lastly from you, Tell us where the race is now. Where are we heading? Where are the boats? What's the end? What's your plans?
Absolutely. The plans is that the boats are, I think, just outside Portugal at the present, in very slow wind conditions. It's not going so fast at the moment. They will pass through the Gibraltar Strait and they will end in Genoa. And the planned arrival is on the 26th of June for the grand finale. There will be some import races, and by the end of that week, we would know who wins the ocean race this time.
Fantastic. And then we have a joint event together in September. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. We organize, as you saw in this video, the Ocean Race Summits, which is high-level global summits, and we do it around the world. And we will have the final one in New York on September 18th. In conjunction with the General Assembly. So I hope that many of people looking at this will take the chance, if they are in New York, to join us there.
Fantastic. I look forward to that. I think we all need to kind of like look more at what we're doing with the oceans, how the oceans are treating us, how we're treating the oceans, and really, as you said, make it part of core business, make it part of our core lives to be taking care of the ocean, to be shepherding the oceans into a better future. I think for me personally, I feel that the ocean is so much part of the fight against the climate emergency, the fact that it's our biggest carbon sink, the fact that this is where some solutions will definitely come for the future. So we're very, very excited to have you here. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. I hope that oceans have rights very, very soon. We wish you well on your way, and I'm sure that UNDP will continue to support you. Thank you both for this great conversation.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
We're joined now with Janet Koons-Lemmel from Danone. You are the Global Sustainability and Advocacy and B Corp Director. I didn't really know that Danone is a B Corp. Can you tell us a little bit about that, first of all?
Absolutely. In fact, it's quite personal because B Corp is what drew me to Danone, and many other people who work at Danone were really brought to Danone because they loved the idea of B Corp. So B Corp is a movement, and it's based on a very simple premise, right? That business can and should be a force for good. So it was a movement that started in 2006, and Danone joined in 2015. And the way B Corp works is that there's a nonprofit that certifies companies based on the highest standards of environment, social, and governance. So it's highest ESG standards. And mostly to date, this has been a movement that's been driven by grassroots, small and medium-sized enterprises. Danone decided that we wanted to be one of the first multinationals to be fully certified as a B Corp. It's a massive undertaking. Already we've done something like 130 certifications. We have to do over 200 to get to 100%. But today, about 75% of our global sales are under B Corp certification, and we're really excited about that.
So, and that's the reason we're gathering here today. We really want to look at what private sector can really do to take climate action, to take action on sustainability. So, can you tell us kind of a little bit more about what what it does to engage with the climate emergency, to engage with sustainability?
Yeah, absolutely. So really, purpose and sustainability have been embedded in Danone from the beginning. The company was created over 100 years ago, and it was created in response to malnutrition in children and gut health problems in children. So it was sold in pharmacies in the beginning. So we've always had this ambition to contribute positively to society. And today, given the climate emergency that you mentioned, a lot of this is about our impact on the environment. We've always had this connection with health, and 90% of our volumes are sold in healthy categories, but we're really trying to step up our ambition and our impact on the environment. So I think it's really important that companies set science-based targets, set targets that are validated, are approved by the Science Based Targets Initiative. We've done that. First, we did it for 2 degrees, and then we updated our targets recently in line with 1.5 across our value chain. So we now have targets not only for our scopes 1 and 2, but also for scope 3 and for forest, land, and agriculture. And so I think that is a starting point. Then it's very important that obviously that you act and that you track your impact. Something that was especially important for us because we're a leader in dairy and plant-based, but we are a leader in dairy, was really stepping up our engagement on methane. Dairy is associated with around 8% of methane emissions worldwide. We know, and the UN has told us, we have to step up our efforts to reduce methane emissions. So at Danone, we saw an opportunity to really lead on this. And earlier this year, we became one of the first major food and agriculture company to set a methane-specific reduction target. And so it's in line with the global methane pledge that so many countries have already signed.
Wonderful. And just in general, here in the Cannes Lions milieu, what advice can you give to private sector to incorporate sustainability into their core business like Danone has done?
Well, I mean, for me, the argument is very simple. This is the future of the economy. Whether we want to or not, we're going to have to transform. The climate is changing. We're going to have to transform the way we source our ingredients. Governments are going to be acting, and we think that's really great. Regulation is going to be changing. Investors are going to be looking more closely. So whatever people say, we need to transform. This is the future of the economy. And so we believe that the businesses that jump into this, that transform first, that see not only the risks, but also the opportunities, are the ones that are going to thrive. So I think that's really important. And I think what businesses can do, especially consumer-facing businesses, is something that's so critical, which is empower public and make them feel that they can be part of the solution. I actually read a very stunning article recently. It was there was a research study that looked at the way media report on climate, and they found that they tend to report a lot on catastrophes, a lot on the natural science dimensions, but not underreport on the research about the economic, the social, the technological dimensions of climate change. So it's leaving the public or consumers feeling very worried, but also like they don't really know what to do. And I think that private companies have a responsibility and an opportunity to help fill this gap.
And just going off that last remark of yours, what advantages do you see that the private sector has, companies like Danone, as compared to where I work at the United Nations or the public sector? What's the advantages of starting there, of doing sustainability as a core business there?
Well, I think we all have our roles, right? We all have our vantage points. And it's in crossing these perspectives, I believe very, very strongly in kind of breaking down silos and having everyone collaborate and talk together, whether it's UNDP and international organizations, governments, NGOs, even the NGOs, and especially the NGOs that challenge us, and private companies. And I think what we see is that often private companies, we do feel the pressure. And so sometimes we're out in front and we're experimenting and we're finding solutions. And there's a really big opportunity. And then going back to governments and international organizations and saying, hey, we think we can do this together. But we need also government action and finding that sweet spot that can lead to real impact and scale.
And in terms of agriculture, it's one of the most carbon-heavy industries out there. Obviously, Danone is addressing that. What advice can you give to other agriculturally based multinationals that can go in the direction that Danone is going? How can you collaborate with those? Can you collaborate with on these kind of issues?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's stunning to me the pace at which we're shifting the paradigm on agriculture. When I first joined Danone in 2017, one of the things that I worked on from the beginning was this refocus of Danone on regenerative agriculture. At the time, people said, "You're crazy. No one knows what that means. Who knows about that?" You know, people tried to convince us to change the wording. Today, so many, I mean, most of the largest companies working in this space has said they want to do this. So now we're working together in Industry 4, and we're trying to align on what that means. And that is a massive opportunity. And so we're seeing this huge paradigm shift, you know, that's fit for purpose for the needs that we see in the world today. And I think that that there's there's a need for companies to collaborate and work with governments, because the key actor in this, and we're very aware of it, is the farmer. And many farmers, it's already, you know, they work hard, and already they have a key role in producing the food that we eat. When we're coming in on top and asking them to change practices, it's not easy. They don't necessarily feel they have the support or the tools they need. And so we have, as government and as private sector, a fundamental responsibility and opportunity to really step up that support for farmers.
I've noticed in the last, I work in this space for a very long time. In the last maybe 8 to 12 months, I've noticed a slight shift in private sector. I feel like we are moving in the right direction now. I feel like there is kind of momentum around the idea of sustainability, around the idea of trying to look at the common good, not only at the bottom line. Do you see that as well?
Absolutely. We're in a period of mainstreaming. Regenerative agriculture is an example. B Corp is another example. When I joined Danone, the idea that the statement that business should be a force for good was so audacious. And now it's kind of, you know, everyone thinks, you know, most companies would say they want to be a force for good. So you see very clearly this mainstreaming of that, and that's enormous. That's a real paradigm shift. I don't think we can we can't overestimate how important that is. Now, the moment we're in is where we need to switch, and we need to make sure that we're actually driving impact on the ground, and we're taking action on the ground. And things like B Corp, they're wonderful tools for this, because we have to be accountable. We have to report on our impact, and that's independently verified. And so tools like that are going to help also companies move, but have the kind of credibility that they need to avoid accusations of greenwashing.
And do you worry about, when you're planning your initiatives, how much is greenwashing coming into that? Are you worried that you will be accused of greenwashing? And what do you have to do to make sure that that doesn't happen? What's the best practices in that?
Yeah, I think all companies are worried about greenwashing, because we want to speak about these issues. We want to engage on these issues, but it's hard, and sometimes we make mistakes. I really fundamentally believe that the best way to avoid accusations of greenwashing is to talk to the experts and talk to the NGOs. And again, especially the NGOs that challenge you. They are going to help keep you honest. So when you're thinking about making a claim, of course, you need to make sure that it will fly from a legal perspective, but you also need to talk to the NGOs and the experts and the authorities in the field to see, is this credible from their perspective? And that, I think there's a real kind of unlock in that space, and maybe a need, and I've been talking about it this week, to break down the silos and to have more collaboration between the companies, the marketing teams, the sustainability teams, and the NGOs themselves.
And that's the walk that you're walking in Danone.
We're trying to.
That's great. You told me, you teased a little bit that you might have an upcoming initiative with UNDP. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're really excited because we're on this journey to deliver our sustainability commitments, and also, so many of those touch on the SDGs. We know we need to work more closely with international organizations and with governments. And so we started talking to UNDP, really following the biodiversity COP. And we saw really a space where our interests are very, very well aligned, our values are very well aligned, and there's a lot of opportunity on the ground to drive impact. So what we're exploring now is what that looks like. How could we work together in various parts of the world on sustainable regenerative agriculture, on waste management, on water protection, and last but not least, really centrally, on livelihoods and inclusion for people.
I just want to, we're coming towards the end, but I want to just touch on that a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about the role of food equity in the journey to sustainability?
Yeah, I think the food, I mean, what I love about working in food is that the impact is tremendous. We talked about climate, around one third of GHG emissions, big driver of biodiversity loss, 70% of freshwater withdrawals linked to agriculture. And then you have the social dimension, which is enormous. The number, I mean, so many people depend on agriculture, depend on food production for their livelihoods. And so many of these people are struggling. And so what we see as Danone, actually we work with a lot of smallholder farmers, and there is an opportunity for multinationals, for large corporations to connect with those populations to help them transform practices, to help them boost productivity, to help them boost profit, and it's really a win-win-win for everybody.
And so in this InCon, when we're here, what's your call to action to other big corporations out there, to other businesses out there? What would you say to them? How can we all work together on this?
Yeah, I would say look for the opportunity. Don't see it as just a risk or a tick the box or a compliance topic. It's the future of the economy, sustainability. So look for the opportunity and then talk with the activists, talk with the experts, talk with governments, talk with everybody, because that's how you're going to figure out what difference that you can make and where you can thrive as a business.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Janet Koons-Lanotte. I got your surname right finally. I'm sorry, but we're very, very, very happy to have you and have Danone represented here. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be moving to the next panel now, but I'm sure we'll continue conversations. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
We've also got a big announcement today to make. The United Nations and UNDP today are launching a new stamp. This is personally for me a very, very big moment. It's to do with the Don't Choose Extinction campaign. The Don't Choose Extinction campaign was launched in 2021 to really combat the climate emergency and very particularly to tackle fossil fuel subsidy reform around the world. And we had a film with a dinosaur barging into the United Nations and giving a very passionate speech about climate change. You can watch it. Google, if you haven't, Google don'tchooseextinction.com or just don't choose extinction. You'll see Frankie the Dino barge into the United Nations. I'm sure you either saw it or will see it. Today, what we're doing is launching a United Nations stamp for Frankie the Dino. The stamp is in various denominations across the world. It's a United Nations stamp. We're through the United Nations postal system, and we are very, very proud to launch here today the Frankie the Dino stamp collection in the United Nations. So please go to the United Nations postal services, and you can purchase your own Frankie the Dino stamp today. Thank you so much.
Who's ready? You are ready? I'm ready. Okay. No worries.
Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Terry Savage, and we're talking today about how the C-suite can drive the level of change needed to make global challenges organisations face. I want to introduce our guests today, but because we've got limited time, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So I'd firstly like to introduce Sarah Beck.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Beck. I have over 30 years' experience of leading operations for the BBC and for the University of Oxford, the Saïd Business School. And I'm now working as a business coach, so having the kind of conversations about leadership and the concerns of the challenges that we're facing at the moment for people in those roles.
Perfect. To your left, Cheryl and Shackle.
So I'm the founder and global CEO of the Marketing Academy, and we exist to develop the talent in marketing, media and advertising to be the board leaders of the future, because we believe that marketing, media and advertising can change the world, influencing 7.5 billion people on the planet, and that's why we invest in their development, making sure they're the best leaders they can possibly be.
Trisha Weiner, welcome.
Hi. So I am global CMO of Connor, which is one of the biggest elevator and escalator companies in the world, and I'm on the executive board. So very much looking forward to talking about this topic, which is very close to my heart.
Right. And Leanne Freemar.
Yes.
I
hi.
surprised you then, so you can now come back.
Keeping me on my toes. Thank you. Yes, Leanne Freemar, Chief Brand Officer of JP Morgan Chase, and helping our organizations, our customers and clients navigate these challenges and transitions.
And last but not least, with Oxford spirals in the background, we've got Dr. Andrew White. We can have a quick bio from you, Andrew.
Be with you in person. I'm actually in Oxford at the moment leading a 3-week leadership program with 40 senior leaders from around the world, discussing some of the topics I think we're going to be talking about today. So I'm a faculty member in the business school. I worked with Sarah for many years. So it's good to be back with you, Sarah. And my research really looks at 2 things. Firstly, what type of leadership is needed between now and 2050. I interview a number of leaders on a podcast I host called Leadership 2050. And I'm also looking at the whole subject of transformation. So leadership for me without transformation is just hot air. And so I'm really interested in how do leaders get things done? How do they bring about the transformation that's required? And I'm currently leading a major research project on that as well here at Oxford.
Thank you and welcome. I'm going to ask specific questions of people, but if anyone else would like to add to a specific question, please feel free. And that means we probably only have to ask one question. So the first question actually is, Sarah, to you. And what in your view, are leaders born or are they made? And are there innate qualities that make people good leaders? And how would you define good leadership?
Yeah, yeah. It would be great, wouldn't it, to think actually that you could be born kind of oven ready with all the qualities and behaviours that you might need. And then it would just be a question of supply about how many of these wonderful people we have. But I actually don't think that's the case. I think leaders are made. I think given the complexity of the world that we now live in, I think the scale of the challenges, the ambiguity that we face, the speed of information and decision-making that's needed, the interconnectedness of those decisions, I think all of that is a kind of shifting picture. So it's not a static state. So the qualities that are needed are changing all the time. So it'd be very difficult to be born with those qualities. So I think leaders are made out of hard work. I think it's about acquiring skills, giving attention and focus to what you are and what you bring. I think above all, good leadership looks like taking ego aside and following a purpose, like identifying a clear purpose that runs through an organization or a company that people will follow. So, you know, the interaction element of a leader is crucial, that how you interact and how you inspire and influence others to follow you. So ego out of the room, there's a colleague of mine used to say, when ego leaves the room, the magic happens. And it's a great thought about, you know, that's when the click happens. So I think, you know, that idea of purpose, the ability to communicate that purpose really clearly calm, compassionate communication. I think we've seen loads of examples of that recently, of strong leadership backed up by clear communication. And then a kind of, courage, the courage to make decisions, but also the courage to relinquish control, so that actually it's more of an even balance of engaging and empowering people that work with you. I think the courage, then follows through, so that command and control just builds bottlenecks and kind of burnout, but actually a coaching mindset, I guess I would say that, but a coaching style of leadership is more sustainable. It's, it's more effective, it's more efficient. And then I guess really, curiosity has to be in all good leaders. Curiosity about input and innovation and ideas, and a kind of breadth of aperture really on the world, but also curiosity about yourself, about your own development, about what do I not know, what do I need to have. I think, that kind of self-reflection in a leader is incredibly important, and that means that, the change that you're making is also backed up often by a personal journey of change. So.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to Andrew. Andrew, we see good leaders who climb to the top, are successful, and then through either ethical dilemma or a business mistake tumble, sometimes catastrophically. How do organisations identify the kind of leaders they need now and for the future? And has that process changed? What should they be looking for now?
Thank you, and great question. And a lot of what I'm going to say, I think, builds on what Sarah says. So I think if you look back in the 20th century, really what you needed to do to get to the top was perform well. You needed to sell, you needed to raise money. If you were in the asset management industry, you need to deliver big projects. It was about performing within what I would call the machine. And I think only now we're realizing that we're living with the legacy of problems around that. So I think what I've really been trying to understand is, what is the next archetype of leadership? What do leaders need to look like going forward? And I didn't do that by just coming up with some more concepts or buzzwords. I really wanted to go out and find examples of leaders who were doing things differently. So if I just run through a couple of things that I found when I looked across the piece in terms of the 21 I interviewed. I think the first one is that they recognize that disruption is normal, and we have to live in this. They have to challenge the status quo. And I think historically we've seen leaders who've struggled to do that. And once they've done that, then there's something about what do I and we as an organization really care about when we look at the world? And are we prepared to sit and accept that we don't have answers to some of the world's big problems? And are we prepared to really go out on a limb and say, even though we don't have answers, we're going to look for solutions? And I think that's really the edge that the world is at the moment. We've seen a lot of leaders, in a sense, they get the rhetoric. But now I think we need solutions. We need, in a sense, a radical reinvention of a number of industries. I think a number of companies are going to fail going forwards over the next few decades because they're just not future fit and ready. If I look at the type of leaders who are really prototyping what the future looks like, they're able to combine things that we previously thought were uncombinable. Now, I'm going to give you some concrete examples of this. I interviewed Odette Excel, who runs the Adara Group. The Adara Group is an investment bank in Australia that's also a development agency. So they have this, this isn't like an investment bank with a foundation on the side. They are an full-blooded investment bank and a full-blooded development agency. They're the world experts in neonatal care in off-grid locations. So they've combined oil and water. They've combined things that we didn't think could be combined. I also interviewed David Katz, who runs something called the Plastic Bank. Most of us look at plastic in oceans and poverty, and we're filled with angst, quite understandably. David doesn't think that way. He actually sees there's a solution here, which is to essentially pay people in low-income countries to collect the plastic. That plastic is recycled. It's labeled plastic for good, trademark plastic for good. It goes back into supply chains, taking plastic out of the oceans and people out of poverty. There's something transformative there. Jack Sim in Singapore, who runs the World Toilet Organization, has changed the policies of both China and India around toilets, put in hundreds of millions of toilets and created a solution to sanitation. Jack has about less than 10 employees, and it's through building a community of change. So there are some new modes, there's some new methods, there's some people who are doing things differently. And then we've got some great stories from, in a sense, the existing organizations, like Unilever, like I think you just had somebody on from Danone, who are doing some incredible things in terms of bringing the resources of those organizations. And so there's something about, understanding, as I started, the status quo isn't working, we're living in disruption, what do I care about, what do we care about, what could we make a contribution to? And can business be a source for good? Can business be an enabler of change? And I think we need the resources of business and the resources of capitalism to address the challenges the world is facing. And that's really what I'm interested in understanding more about.
Thank you, Andrew. Move on to Sherilyn. Sherilyn, you run leadership development programs in EMA, USA, APAC, all in the marketing and advertising space. Do you see a difference across the region as it relates to leadership style, and in areas of sustainability, is the awareness across the regions the same, or are some areas lagging behind?
Well, that's interesting, and I don't want to upset all my cohorts in the three regions. but I will say that there is some differences in both leadership style and their awareness of sustainability. I think Australia, which I adore, and Terry, obviously you're an Aussie, but I absolutely adore it, our academy in Australia, I felt quite a profound lack of knowledge even about what the SDGs were when we set up there 9 years ago. So the awareness was really low. They didn't hear about the global goals. They weren't doing anything. Now that shifted over the last few years. But even after ESG, our Australia community was coming to us last year. And we'd been running ESG modules for years in the other two regions, so there is a bit of a difference around awareness. I think it's all shifting in the right direction now. The leadership style thing, God, that's interesting. So we do two different levels of program. So we run a program that we call the scholarship, which is for the emerging leaders. So they're all in their 30s and maybe early 40s, and then we run a senior program exclusively for brand side CMOs. So they're already, many of those are already in the C-suite, and we run those in the three regions. And so what is interesting, I feel, is this: it isn't so much of a difference in leadership style or capability across the three regions, but there is quite a gap between the emerging leaders and the guys that are already at the top, the folk that have been there, seen it and done it. And I have a theory that the baby boomers and Gen Xers need to get out of the bloody way. And the emerging leaders that are coming up underneath us, as long as we really invest in them, really share our knowledge and experience with them, they're the ones that are going to change the world. And I don't want to cause offence to anybody, but I'm on the edge of Gen X and baby boomer. And even I know that I just need to get out of the way. Because the real kind of leadership we need to make these changes happen in the world over the next 15 years is that emerging generation. We're not going to do it. We've already screwed it up. It's already going backwards, right? We've blown it. The emerging levels that are coming underneath us, they're different. They are more vulnerable, they're more authentic, they're more passionate, they're more compassionate, they have more empathy, they're much more curious, so they're really seeking to find ways to make a difference. And once we start bringing those people right up, that's when the change is going to happen. And I would advise anybody, any company out there, to put at least one young, diverse thinking youngster on your board. We've had reverse mentoring for a while, right? But we're now getting approached by organisations that know of us through our scholarship and our fellowship programme to say, who have you got within your emerging leader community that could come and be a non-exec director on our board? Because we need that youth voice right in the centre of our boardroom. Hallelujah. Once you really start listening to that generation of talent, that's when you can make some change really happen. So that's my view.
Well, that's very good. And Australia is a long way away, so it takes a while for things to filter down, And then we get it.
And then we'll save the barrier reef.
Exactly. I'm going to ask this question as marketers to both Leanne and Tricia.
because I'm sort of interested in your different perspectives. We do not see enough women at board level to actually help create organisational change. We do not see enough marketers at board level to actually give the voice of the consumer's perspective in the boardroom through the marketer. How quickly is this going to take to actually fix? Because despite the rhetoric, it's a very slow process from what I can see. So maybe, Trish, you want to start, and then we'll move across to Leanne.
So I guess I'm in a privileged position because I do sit on my executive board currently, but I am one of 3 women, and the board in total is around 15. I think for me, I feel a great responsibility to role model that. Part of what I have done since joining Connor is to be very active with creating an employee resource group globally, supporting and sponsoring that, and really making sure that women believe that it is possible to move seamlessly through the organisation into the most senior ranks. And I think one of the challenges is if there are not women visibly on that board, then there is a lack of belief that that's going to be possible for others. The other thing that I think that's really important about that community is they support each other. So actually having other women to talk to about their experiences, to make sure that they are resilient and that they're not going to, perhaps at the first hurdle, fall, but they will continue to believe that it is possible to create change by continuing to do the role that they're doing, but to push for that change themselves. And I think that has been really significant in this first stage of the shift. But I agree, I don't think this change in my time as a CMO and getting to this point, I've really tried to drive change around gender equity. And as Sherilyn said, we're not seeing that change come through in reality. So still something is not right. But I do feel in the current state, and Sherilyn was saying that they've just now looked at the fellowship the fellowship group in America, and actually, interesting, it's only 4 guys and 16 women this year. It's fabulous. So you know, so it's going to happen. It is going to happen. The one other thing I think I would say is it's really important. I know there's lots of question marks about should you have targets, should you not have targets, and for sure, boards are about inclusion and diversity more broadly than just gender, but you do need that gender representation. So actually having some targets around it, I think, is also helpful. So this is something that organisationally we have a target for 2030 now, that we will have 35% of our leaders across the organisation will be women. I would say that's the minimum that we would be aiming for. We need to push that faster, but I think it's good to have that ambition and to make sure that the organisation is focused, particularly in the industrial sector. The industrial sector, because of its very nature, is still very male-oriented, and so it does take longer to then bring, you know, the engineers through the organisation to make sure that actually we've got that wider representation.
Okay, Leanne, is the banking industry very male-dominated?
I won't speak for the industry as a whole, because I think there's a lot out there on that. But I will say, you know, I feel very fortunate to be a part of JP Morgan Chase, because we do have very excellent representation from our board of directors on down, including our operating committee, as well as CEOs of the major businesses. I think it sends a message to the organization, both to women within the organization. You know, you can't be what you can't see, and I think it telegraphs to, you know, the 330,000 approximately employees that we have around the world that this is a company that is, you know, very invested in ensuring that there is equity at every level of the company. And I do think that it is a reason why we see younger generations want to come and be a part of our organization. Because we are very much, you know, putting our money where our mouth is, so to speak. And so I think as an industry as a whole, there's always going to be work to do. We will never be done. And it's not like you can hit a target and then just sit back and expect that target to maintain itself. That is a daily practice of ensuring that you're cultivating talent, investing in new pipelines for talent, as well as recruiting that talent, giving them an incredible opportunity as an employee to grow and become a leader themselves, and and pass that along.
Okay, thank you. We're sort of winding down time-wise, so we did better than one question. We got 4 in, but. Andrew, I'd just like to ask your perspective on, we're at the SDG Summit, we're talking about C-suite leadership and organisational change. And leadership is, by its nature, complex. You've got P&L, growth, HR, change and risk. What do you feel is the driving force for leaders to embrace topics such as the SDGs? Does it come top down, bottom up? How can you stop the toe in the water approach vis-a-vis the total embracing of the topic approach?
Yep. So I think we're starting to see some really concrete examples of where organizations have recognized they have to move in this direction. They've got rhetoric out there. They've got certain practices out there. Then they put it into their marketing, but the marketing isn't backed up by real or enough concrete business activity. And we're starting to see campaigns, and we're starting to see regulators come in. In the UK, we've had cases around certain banks that have been told to stop doing I think they've had problems with the Advertising Standards Authority because their advertising, in a sense, has got ahead of their business practices. So for me, you can't ignore this stuff now. Either you go into it or you'll get dragged into it. The challenge is a lot of people are in it with good rhetoric, with some business activity, but the world is moving so quickly and the expectations are moving so quickly that some activity is not enough. And it is now, to me, it's about acceleration and pace. And it's about movement and concrete activity around things like carbon reduction, around technological shifts. I also think, I look at 2 types of organizations. I look at the large organizations, the successful ones who've largely come out of the 20th century, and I look at the newer ones. There is an incredible amount of innovation out there. There are people who are radically reconfiguring what it means to be in certain industries. And I think one of the panelists was talking about getting out of the way so that the younger generations can come through. If that older generation doesn't, that talent will go into those new organizations, because in pretty much every industry, there are people who are seeking to reinvent and recreate, and with business models that are much more aligned to the SDGs. They're putting it front and center in terms of what they're doing. They're not seeing a conflict between profit and purpose. They're seeing the 2 things embedded and together. And I think there's a real question as to whether or not some of those large successful organizations will move quick enough. And therefore, this isn't about the SDGs, it's about competition, and where future sources of competition will come from.
Great. Okay, I think we're on our final question to Sherilyn. But anyone wants to chip in, honestly, please do, because I know it's a long way to come for one question. As it relates to gender and diversity, of the people you develop, what percentage are women, and how diverse are the people you work with? Are you happy with those ratios? And if not, how do you change them? And indeed, what are you currently doing with the Marketing Academy to address that issue? Now, you've got to answer that all in 1
minute.
In
oh
1
my
minute.
God, oh my God, oh my God. So in the US, it's a fabulous breadth of diversity in every context in our programs, because I think the US have been really pushing on diversity inclusion for longer than seems any other region. Don't get me started on Australia. That's a whole new topic on its own. And the UK is beginning to change. But when we first set up the scholarship, I was shocked, rigid, by the lack of diversity across every context in the UK in our industry. It's a white, middle-class, privileged industry. Everybody comes through the same universities, the Red Book universities, and that was mirrored in our scholarship classes, and I found it horrifying. Across the whole industry, it's in agency land and marketing. To the extent that 5 years ago we launched our own charity, the Marketing Academy Foundation, and it exists to give young people from those backgrounds that don't usually get the easy step on the ladder in our industry, because we recruit like for like, into our industry with fully salaried apprenticeships, so the only one of its kind. And the young talent, 18 to 24 years old-ish, and that talent have come from challenging backgrounds, underprivileged backgrounds, been chucked out of school, haven't had the privilege of going to university, and therefore are so diverse in thinking style, in race, in belief systems, in everything. And that's the only way we could start to shift, right, is to make a systemic change at the grassroots level when they're finishing school, to bring that talent into our industry, to hopefully start to role model. As you said, you've got to see who you are in any and every context. But there was just not enough work being done in our industry, particularly for that, and we're passionate about that. So we work with loads of groups, we work with youth groups, we work with all sorts of diverse groups to show them that there's a path through into our industry through our apprenticeship program in the foundation. But that was as a result of realising that the diversity in our industry was horrific. The gender thing, there's more. It's quite an attractive profession for females, so we've never really had a gender issue, although interesting, in the first year of the fellowship, so Trish is an alumni of the fellowship programme, in the first year, 10 years ago, the fellowship programme, it was 70% male and 30% female in that first cohort. So as Trish said, the cohort that's just started in the US, 16 women, 4 male. That's a sea change in 10 years.
That's not gender diverse.
10 years, though. What a shift in 10 years. So we're getting there.
Fantastic. Sarah Beck, Sherilyn Shackle, Tricia Weiner, Leanne Freemar, and Dr. Andrew White in Oxford, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ulrika Moder, and I'm Assistant Secretary General with UNDP, United Nations Development Programme, and we are going to talk about the midpoint of the Sustainable Development Goals. And with me I have Sam. So who are you, Sam?
Hi, Ulrika. So I'm Sam Roddick. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Deloitte Consulting globally.
Yeah. And UNDP and Deloitte, we work together, and we are looking at the world the way it looks right now, but also, of course, then how we can change the world. And, of course, the midpoint of the Sustainable Development Goals that were decided back in 2015 is an interesting moment of stock-taking in a quite troubled world, I must say. We were talking about yesterday as we met that, and I've been mentioning, we are halfway there, but nowhere near. On the contrary, we actually see 30% of the achievements going in the wrong direction, which is, of course, not what this was meant to galvanize. 50% of actions are halted. We don't see progress, and only in 12% of the goals we actually see progress right now. So it's a troubled world. But how would you say that we could make change happen?
How can we accelerate the change?
Yeah.
So I think the hopeful view is that we are at close to a tipping point, a positive tipping point. There is a great deal of appetite in the corporate world to invest in projects that accelerate the transition to green energy, that invest in nature, and that move a number of the SDGs forward. And we know from research that our corporate clients are sitting on a great deal of dry capital, and what they're looking for is high quality investments that they can make to move things forward. So there's hope, because that amount of investment, that amount of interest could make a real difference if we could find the vehicle to drive that investment.
So that's interesting. So would you say that the past year, the Sustainable Development Goals and the discussions about sustainability has actually galvanized the understanding, and that there is a moment where we could now drive investments?
I think there is a slow, perceptible move towards that tipping point. And you see it in places like Texas. Texas is not known as a state of tree huggers. Yet the state of Texas now has got multiple solar generation projects, facilities, however you refer to it properly, in it. And so you're beginning to see, the arch capitalists wake up to the fact that there is an investment grade opportunity in sustainable power generation. And so you start to get that kind of shift, and that can unlock, I think, something that hitherto we've been unable to access in achieving the acceleration that we need to achieve.
Yeah. So in the UN and also with UNDP, as we are also concerned about all member states across the world, and not least the least developed countries that we call them sometimes, and the middle income economies, how would you say that we could enable those investments to actually reach communities, countries that need them the most? Because right now we also see an increasing inequality within, but also between nations, that is causing also the risk of escalating conflicts and other problems. How could we, from the UN side, also be better at enabling the environment for these investments to actually happen where they are most needed?
Well, why don't I start by answering that question, thinking about the role that organisations like Deloitte can play. So, we can see and gather the data on how an investment in Texas drives a return. And by sharing that data with corporate investors, we can drive investment into similar projects on Pacific Islands to move away from power generation through imported fossil fuel, or into African countries, because the investment profile and the profile on the return isn't going to be radically different if the project's in Texas versus in Nambia. So I think there's a role that we play to open the eyes to the investment community about the possibilities and help give them some reassurance that this is good quality investment. There is, I forget what the number is, you'll probably know it, but there is a very big delta between the amount of money that needs to be invested in protecting nature versus the amount of money that is being invested. But if you look at the quantum of capital that is sitting in corporate organisations at the moment, actually it's more than equal to the amount of money. So if we can unlock that investment grade opportunity, then I think things flow.
So what you're saying is that impact investors, they're actually looking for opportunities, and that the data that we can have, you as Deloitte, but also the UN and organizations like UNDP, could enable them to make these investments happen.
I hope and believe that is what will happen, and it does feel like we are close to a tipping point on that.
Yeah. And that's, of course, also what can make also the scalable solutions that we are looking for within fields, as you were saying, like renewable energy, for instance. So anything else that you would want to share? And how would you like, as we are here in Cannes, also discussing with the creative industry, how would you like to see things be different? How could we communicate in a way that makes it possible for people, for enterprises, for investors to understand that there are these opportunities?
That's a very good question. So I think this community in particular has a responsibility for finding a new way to talk positively about the success stories that are happening.
Yeah.
You know, I personally believe that the end of the world is nigh messaging that some associate with particularly with the climate emergency is perhaps holding back, or perhaps it isn't galvanizing the action we need to galvanize.
Yep.
A more hopeful message, which isn't, and that's not to say a naive message, but a more hopeful message about here is something that has made a difference, and this thing that's made a difference could be replicated 1,000 times or 1,000,000 times.
Yeah.
And if it was replicated 1,000 times or 1,000,000 times, now the impact starts to be really measurable. I think, or really significant in our move towards meeting the goals. So there's very much a role to play about sharing the good news.
Yeah.
And then I think we have to, as a society, tap into the changes in culture and the changes in attitude, particularly with a millennial and increasingly a Gen Z workforce starting to be the largest proportion of the workforce in many organizations. All of the research shows that the attitudes of people of the younger generations are more positive, and they want to see action taken by those that they provide their custom to and those that they are employed by. And so I think driving or tapping into that cultural change to create a more positive corporate agenda is a huge opportunity, but it's an opportunity in particular, I think, for the community in Cannes, in how do you create the narrative, the messaging, the storytelling that really enables that shift.
Great. I think that's a good end of our conversation. I mean, people, but also investors, corporates are opportunity driven. And by the way, also politicians. So if we take that angle to our communication, using then the data and the broad partnerships that we have, and also heads up for the partnerships that you will also see grow out of also what we do together between UNDP and Deloitte. So very much looking forward to that.
Super. And are we timed out, or do I have time to ask you one or two questions, Ulrika?
I think you can, yeah.
Okay, so we're at midpoint of the journey. We're 7.5 years in, as you said. What are the big lessons that you as an organisation have learned from the first half of the SDG journey, and how do you see sort of applying those lessons to the next half?
So I think what we have learned, and I would say is my key message, is that we need to look for systems solutions. It sounds complicated, but as we were discussing renewable energy, it's really about poverty reduction and economic opportunities, but it's also about the green transitioning. So here I see a lot of opportunities that we can make change happen and actually drive the achievement of several goals at a time. That's what we mean when we speak about system solutions, that you can't really tackle the sustainable future if you look at only climate change. You have to address the socioeconomic situation to make people come along and feel that they're part of a change that would also create green jobs, for instance. And that's what we can do in the UN to with the knowledge that we have, but also key examples, also inspire for more strategic system solutions.
So I'm going to ask a question that you asked me. You've had some great success with the Don't Choose Extinction campaign, and I think achieved the primary objective, which was to get resolution to start removing fossil fuel subsidies by governments. What are you looking for from this community, the community in Cannes, to move things forward? And where do you think the opportunities of them lie to advance the SDGs?
So I think we need great communication that actually makes decision makers, politicians, understand that they need to lay the ground, also for the private sector to be able to do their part. So looking at also the different actors as one to make the change happen is, I think, what needs to also be part of the journey, and the creative community are key to make that happen.
Super. Maybe one last question then. So my client base is large. Our client base as Deloitte is largely corporates, the private sector. What one piece of advice would you have for a CEO? What one habit could they adopt to actually make a real difference?
So I think, as you, that the young workforce of today, they are creative and they are also purpose-led. So I think that the senior leadership in corporates, they really need to understand how they can motivate these young co-workers and make them part of central decisions. And I think it would be so much more fun as well in workplaces where you actually look at the talent, the innovation of all colleagues. And I also believe that you need to connect, and you're actually expected as a senior leader in corporates nowadays, but also in the public sphere, to show that you lead by example. So if young people are purpose-led, then you also have to be purpose-led.
I think that's a great place to stop. Thank you, Ulrika.
Great. Thanks.
We've come to the end of our broadcast today. We've had incredible conversations today, from oceans to how industries can get involved. We had Danone with us today. We had a really rich conversation with the Walt Disney Foundation and basketball. It's been fascinating to listen to on the sidelines. We'll be back here tomorrow for another day of conversations all day. Tomorrow we'll be looking at climate heroes and climate stories, about sustainability, about climate change. I assure you that it will be a great program, and I hope that you can join us again tomorrow. Thank you so much today for all of you out there joining us, and we hope to see you again. Thanks very much.